Open up your Bibles to Luke 11. Luke 11, 37 to 54. We are going to be reading a portion of Scripture where Jesus is probably more harsh than maybe ever before. Where he is speaking very clearly to a group of people who do not understand. The reason is, in the faith, we're called to be devoted. But in our attempts to be devoted, we can actually easily be distracted. It started off with Mary and Martha, where Martha was serving, slaving away in the kitchen, sees her younger sister sitting at Jesus' feet. She's annoyed, she's tired, has all these things cooking, probably burning at that time, and really just gets bitter at Mary, gets even angry at Jesus, saying, Jesus, tell Mary to help me. But it's in that Jesus is very, very clear. No. You have to be devoted. You're distracted. And what this passage is a life where your faith, your religion, is full of distractions, and there is no devotion. And how ugly is it? It's as ugly as what we will see here. What he's talking about is a life without Jesus. That you don't have to believe in the saying, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? We often think a life like that is a life apart from Jesus. But it's very, very clear that your life doesn't have to be about drugs, sex, and rock and roll for it to be a life without Jesus. You could actually be like that prodigal son who actually comes back, and you're just like the elder brother, right? You're just still living a life without Jesus. And so this is for you if you consider yourself religious, if you consider yourself committed, chances are the Lord will be speaking to you that you would also hear the warning, the concern that these words have. 11:37 to 54. While Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with him, so he went in and reclined at the table. The Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash before dinner. And the Lord said to him, Now you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You fools! Did not he who made the outside make the inside also? But give as alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and every herb, and neglect justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you love the best seat in the synagogues and the greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves, and people walk over them without knowing it. One of the lawyers answered him, Teacher, in saying these things you insult us also. And he said, Woe to you, lawyers also, for you load people with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets whom your fathers killed. So you are witnesses, and you consent to the deeds of your fathers, for they killed them, and you build their tombs. Therefore also the wisdom of God said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and persecute, so that the blood of all the prophets shed from the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, it will be required of this generation. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter yourselves, and you hindered those who were entering. As he went away from there, the scribes and the Pharisees began to press him hard and to provoke him to speak about many things, lying in wait for him to catch him in saying something, in something he might say. The idea of woe is a curse. It's a curse to these religious leaders that Jesus is heartbroken, but not just heartbroken, not just disappointed. It's this curse that he speaks against them. What is this that you are doing? Because what are they doing? They are practicing Christianity, but they are not Christian, right? They have a distracted faith and not a devoted faith. It's a point when the religion has become about a religion and not a relationship. And he rails against them because they're practicing the faith but missing God. Imagine that. You spend all this time and all this energy trying to serve God, trying to be devoted to God, but you miss him. And if this is the only passage in Scripture where Jesus rails against the religious leader, we can all be like, okay, they were really, really bad. Something was off. They were blind. But Jesus does it throughout. But not only do you see it in the New Testament with Jesus, you see it with Paul, how so many people were preaching a gospel that was Jesus-less, meaning there's devoted people in the church in the New Testament who were missing it. So you can then say, okay, it's maybe the New Testament. But you go to the Old Testament. If you read like a book like Isaiah, it starts off railing against the Israelites. So you start to think, oh, they must have been irreligious. They must have been living this pagan life, this heathen life. But in that, God even says, your sacrifices, I don't accept. Meaning, they're going to the sanctuary, they're going to the tabernacle, they're going to the temple throughout the Old Testament. They're practicing the faith, but they're missing God. And so the question that we must all ask, if we're genuinely honest, if we genuinely understand that we're not fully self-aware, if we understand the concept of blind spots, chances are, oftentimes, we are religious without this relationship. This man, Jefferson Bethke, about 8 years ago, put out this spoken word poem. The picture here shows a little bit of it. And you may know of the scenery. And he talks about the idea of Jesus as being greater than religion. Right? It went viral. Chances are many of you have seen it. But, the whole idea is Jesus versus religion, Jesus versus Christianity. That's his whole argument. And in the comments section, one person writes, I'm confused. You first start by saying you hate religion, then you start speaking about Christianity. Isn't that a religion? Or should the title of this ridiculous video be Why I Hate Every Other Religion Not Called Christianity? Let me clarify what I mean in terms of it's about a relationship and not a religion. Is Christianity a religion? Yes, it is. We are not so ignorant to say, oh, it's not. It's a religion. It's a religion. It's a viable, legitimate, respected religion. But in that, it's much more than a religion. But what we can all fall prey to is that we simply just do a religion. We simply do a bunch of, a list of do's and don'ts that would please God. And that's what Jefferson was speaking and railing against. That Jesus is not about purely a religion. It's something actually much more that you could have this walk and this relationship with God. And so, with all of that having been spoken, the first idea is being blind to religion. Ask your neighbor if you are blind. Are you blind? Are you blind? Are you blind? There's an answer to that question. If you said, no, I am not blind, chances are you are blind. We all have a blind spot. And the only way that we'll actually get anywhere we'll progress in any way in this text, is for us to all acknowledge, all admit that we have a tendency to make this about a religion as opposed to a relationship, as opposed to Christ. We all do that all the time. And that's why from the Old Testament, from these verses, it says from the days of Abel, right, to the last prophet of the Hebrew canon, Zechariah, to Jesus' days, to the new church, it's all there. And since then, we've seen it throughout church history. We get it wrong, we get it wrong, we get it wrong. And so if we have the audacity to think, not us, oh, you're blind, oh, you don't get it. And that's when we can start to make some headway. Chances are you're blind. What are you blind to? You're blind to this religion and the pitfalls of what this religion has. Verse 37, when Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with him. So Jesus accepts, right? He went in, reclines at the table. The Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash before dinner. And the Lord said to him, now you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. The silence of the Pharisees' question is loud. What I mean by that is they don't ask a question. Jesus is invited. Chances are everyone else goes to wash their hands. And this is not simply me yelling at my kids, wash your hands are dirty. You have germs on there, bacteria. It's not that. For them, it was a way of being spiritually clean. What they would do is they added on top of the Old Testament law that before you would eat, you would wash your hands because you may have come across someone that's unclean or you may have somehow become unclean. And so you wash your hands to be spiritually clean before you eat. And so Jesus knows the ritual. Jesus knows what the cool kids do. Okay? The cool kids are washing their hands. Jesus is reclining, watching everybody wash their hands. And they are watching Jesus not wash their hands. And so you would think Jesus, being the one that's invited, he should have some manners and wait for conversation. But he doesn't. It's like the idea of his heart's, the motor's running, right? The engine's been revving. He sees what the Pharisees do. He sees what the scribes do. And he's angry. He feels it. And so they don't ask him a question. He doesn't even wait for them to ask a question. He sees them, he knows what they're thinking, and then he just goes off. You clean the outside, but you don't clean the inside. Jesus, what's going on? You're full of greed, you're full of wickedness. How can you not see that? God made both the inside and the outside, right? Jesus waits for them to actually wash their hands. He could have told them as they're going to wash their hands, whoa, hold on. Before you wash your hands, let's talk about this. What are you guys doing? He could have done that and had a discussion. No. He waits for that timing. Why does he wait for that timing? Because they're blind. They're blind to their religiosity. They're blind to this works righteousness aspect of the faith. And so what he has to do, he has to wait for them to actually go through it, to see Jesus not wash his hands, and he waits for that moment when they're full of emotion, judging Jesus. And it's in that moment when they're judging Jesus, now he's ready to speak, because this is not a blind spot he's trying to reveal. You see that anger? You're so disgusted by what I don't do? He's like, that right there, what is that? What's he doing? He could have had an easy discussion about it, but he wants them to be heightened emotionally because he's trying to reveal the pride. He's trying to reveal the heart, these blind spots. Because in verse 39, it's very, very clear, they're full of greed and wickedness. It's not just a little bit. It's not just, oh, I got a little bit of greed on me today. It's not that, right? They're full of it. It's not just, oh, wickedness. Ugh. Oh, there we no, they're full of it and they can't see. And yet they're blind. They're the ones judging Jesus. It's throughout the Old Testament. One of the most clear ones is Hosea 6:6. For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. How easy is it to have lived this Christian life and not know God? How easy is that? We see it all the time. How hard is it to pray? Isn't prayer one of the gifts God has given us, that we would commune with Him, spend time with Him? But think about that. That we don't know Him. We are not able to pray to Him. Because oftentimes we're more religious than having this relationship. How many of us know God? Not even in terms of that relationship, but really know the Word. If I was to ask you, can you defend the deity of Christ in Scripture? Would you know where to go at all? Right? And think about that. For some of us, we've been in church 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And we don't know the fundamental aspects of which portions of Scripture say what about God. Then think about the question, have we been so caught up with religion that we don't know God? And that's what they're being indicted of. You don't know. You don't know God. We all have blind spots. We all have a list of do's and don'ts. We all have an idea of what religion looks like, what good religion looks like. We have an idea of what a good Christian is. No, at the core, when it's all said and done, do you know God? What He stands for? What's revealed about Him in Scripture? Do you know that? And do you dwell with Him? It starts there. We all have these blind spots. And when they're accused, when these Pharisees are accused, when these lawyers, these scribes are accused, they're the righteous of the righteous, right? They're not second league level. They're the most spiritual. Why are they always pointed out? It's because it's these people that are so blind, it must force us to ask the question, am I blind? Have I been missing it all these years? For me this week, I asked myself that as a professional Christian, full-time pastor, right? Am I missing it? I'm sure I've missed it in many ways. I think it's when we start to be open to what God is really trying to show us, we can actually start to really have a dialogue with the Lord. And so what are these signs? So now if you're open to what God is doing, if you're open to being blind, if you're able to admit, maybe I am blind, then the questions are, now these signs. The signs that you are maybe more religious than having this relationship. What are some of these signs? Verse 39, you clean the outside, you don't clean the inside, you're full of greed, you're full of wickedness. Verse 40, you fools. The idea of fools in Proverbs is someone who just doesn't see it. They make the same mistakes over and over and over. You fools, did not He who make the outside also make the inside? Give alms, but give as alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. It's a very, very simple message. It's so easy for us to focus on the outside, the exterior, what we need to do that week. We have to read our Bible, we have to not do certain sins, and that's what we continue to focus on. But in that, we miss God. You miss the inside. You miss what it's all about. And He uses this image of a clean cup that's a clean cup on the outside, but it's dirty on the inside. And we've all experienced that. We've gone to a restaurant, sit down, you look at your cup, you're about to pour your water in there, and you see some old food dried up. You're like, ugh, right? But how gross would it be if you show everyone else, my cup's so dirty, disgusting. Pour out the water. You'd be like, whoa, that's gross. Why? Because it's gross. That's the whole idea that Jesus is saying. Why would you even do that? What purpose is it if it's clean on the outside? You hail down the waiter. Waiter, oh, this cup is dirty. Please get me a new glass. He looks at it. Looks clean. Like, no, look on the inside. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do that. You're thinking, hello? Obviously it matters it's clean on the inside. And that's what Jesus is saying. Obviously, your heart matters. You can fool everybody else. The very people that cheer you on can be the very ones that are fooled. They may be even fooling themselves. Because the inside matters. But we make this mistake. It's only the inside that matters. No. Jesus is very clear. He affirms the inside and the outside. Right? Verse 42. Woe to you, you tithe mint, rue, every herb, but you neglect justice and the love of God. But look, he affirms it. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. He's affirming tithing. He's affirming the external. You can't just say, God, you and me, we're good. My heart's pure. But you don't love. You don't give. You don't serve. You don't help. No, it matters. But songs like, and it's all about the heart of worship. Yes, it's good. But what it may lead you to is simply thinking, it's only the heart that matters. No. Jesus is being very, very clear. He actually affirms tithing. I've heard very, very regularly, the New Testament doesn't talk about tithing. Just give whichever percentage you want. It's pretty clear right here that Jesus affirms tithing from the Old Testament. 10% of what you make, you give to the Lord. Right? It's just very basic principle. That's a minimum. For these religious people, that's what they were doing. It was a minimum. You give to the Lord. But then, he gets the heart of it. You know what? It's actually easy to give. 10%, it's really not that much. When you think about it in terms of it's God who gives you all of it, what he's actually telling you to is keep 90%. Right? That's great. Right? That's like the idea. You only give 10%. What Jesus is saying is, yeah, of course you give 10%. That's easy, 10%. But now, you neglect justice, you neglect the love of God. It's really simple. We should give. We should give to the church. If you actually believe in the church and you believe how they use the money, all the more you should give. If you don't necessarily believe in how the church is using their money, I think that's a legitimate reason, right? So you could be a good steward of your money. But it's past that. It's saying you give that, these guys at least give that, but you don't care about justice. You have no compassion for people, right? It continues on later on, talking about how they put on these burdens upon people in their pursuit for God. They put on more and more burden to be clean, to be righteous, to be a disciple maybe. But in that, they don't even help. There's no love for people. So we can all respond to that by saying, I love people. Yeah, I love people. I think what Jesus would simply say is, well, do you give to them? We can all say, yeah, I love. It's the internal and the external. It both matters. It both matters. A couple of weeks ago, in our small group, we're talking about relationships and the importance of just kind of gifts, knowing our spouse, knowing what kind of gifts that we should give. And one couple asked for permission to share this story. It was something along the lines of, I think it was her first maybe birthday in which they, as they were together, something like that. It was a pretty big event, and he wanted to really show his love for her. And so what he does is he thinks about what to give her and thinks, oh, I know what to give her. Goes on the internet, looks for a child who is hungry. There's this one specific picture that he chose from UNICEF, I think it was, of this starved African child. He frames it and gives it to her. Imagine if that's you. You're excited. Oh, what's my boyfriend or fiance, or what's he gonna do for me? Maybe it's gonna be a ring. Maybe he's gonna propose, right? Maybe whatever it is, right? And he's like, "Here, honey, you're the best." She opens it up, a framed picture of a starved African kid. She's like, "What is that? Like, what is that?" After discussion, she understood a little bit more of where she was coming from. Right? You talk to the guy, his heart was pure. He thought he had a great idea of how she would receive it. What I'm trying to say is the internal and the external, it's got to match. It's got to match. That's what Jesus is saying. Your spirituality, it's not all about the heart. It is all about the heart. But so much more than that. If you truly have the right heart, the externals, it follows through. The more and more you know your spouse when you're married, the better you're able to give her gifts, the better you're able to communicate your love towards her. Because the internal matters. In the beginning, all the internal, we're all good, right? Husband, spouse, first day, full of love. But what happens? Make mistake. Good intentions the whole time. Mistake. What happens after years? You don't know me, you don't love me, but I did. I do. What is it? It's because the internals, it might have been pure, good intention, but the external, it's off. Jesus is saying the internals matter. To genuinely know the Lord, to love the Lord. But the externals matter too. What do you do with that? And here it's very specific. You can give to the church all you want, but do you love the poor? As I was preparing this week, I felt that I needed to give you a clear way for you to follow through on giving to the poor. We're not going to spend much time on it, but I wanted to make sure that if the Lord is moving in your heart and in your life, and you want to somehow tangibly give to the poor, what I asked is, I asked my friend Matt, who works at Compassion Ministries, to send over a bunch of sponsorship forms so that you can actually today change that. Because the internal and the external matters. There's no pressure. There's no partnership with Compassion. But what I do know of them is they're all about children, they're all about the poor, they're all about the church, they're all about the gospel. I've done a vision trip with them. In any country that you go to, they ask you, pick any child, we'll send you every receipt in which how that money was used. Fully transparent with their money. You go to these sites, children who have been sponsored by Compassion, who end up going to college, who get great jobs in the cities, often they go back to their small little village because they want to now give. They want to now share Christ. The fruit is amazing. So what I wanted to do is to actually have everyone receive a form to be able to sign up for Compassion. And so as I continue on with the sermon, these forms will be passed out. Receive it, because I want to receive it. If you already are giving, if you already have a Compassion child, if you are already giving in a different way, you can simply, as you leave, put it back in the box, and we'll recycle those for the second service. But I just wanted to give you a tangible, clear way that from today on, you're caring about the poor. And there's no more excuse with that. I think it's about 45,000 won a month here in Korea. And they're happy to help with you. If you don't speak Korean very well, but they have information. They have information and everything. If you do sign up today, I encourage you to, in your Connect cards, let us know, and then we'll gather all the forms and we'll send it over to them. I just want to give you a clear way for you to care about the poor today. In this, Jesus' indictment to them is that they tithe, but they don't care for justice. They have no compassion for the people. There's no love for God. But in that, there's no love for people overall. Verse 46, woe to you lawyers, for you load people with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. With their desire to follow the Lord and to be devoted to Him, they ended up creating a bunch of rules that ended up actually distracting them from God. We've seen this through different periods of our own faith journey, right? If you were a Christian, maybe in the 80s, what was really popular amongst Christian circles, at least from where I was from, is you don't listen to secular music, because secular music is from the devil. Right, and they would come around with different pastors who would play the music backwards and having this demonic message. From that point, I remember thinking, I shouldn't listen to Christian music, or I shouldn't listen to secular music. I remember in college, it had a certain philosophy about dating, and they would enforce it upon every Christian. If you're Christian, you date in this way and only this way. Many of these are often with good intentions. If you're a committed Christian, you don't drink. We see that in cultures. We see that in certain denominations. Are these things bad? No. Is there wisdom in not listening to certain songs? Yes. Is there wisdom in how you should date? Yes. Is there wisdom in not drinking? Yes. But then to make it a broad statement and expect everyone to do it, that's what they were doing wrong. They were adding on top of the law. And in that, they were burdening people. It's fine for you to be convicted to avoid certain things. Absolutely, 100%. If you're going against your conscience, Paul says that it is a sin. Follow your conscience. Absolutely. But then to expect that from somebody else, now you're burdening their conscience. You're binding their conscience. And that's what they were doing. They were distracting people who wanted to be devoted. Some signs that the faith becomes more of a religion than this relationship. And so then why does this happen? It happens all the time, from Abel's time, throughout the Old Testament, to New Testament, to the church, to church history. Why does this always happen? Isn't it interesting? I think it's fascinating. Why does this always happen in every religion, in every culture, in every religion, but specifically in Christian history? Because isn't it that God should be so big, His grace so wide, that these things shouldn't happen? But the reason that this happens all the time, we see a glimpse of it in verse 43. Woe to you Pharisees, for you love the best seat in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplace. What happened for these Pharisees? I believe they started off with good intentions. I don't think they joined the Jewish faith to simply elevate themselves. But I think what happens is when a religion becomes about you, it becomes religion. For these Pharisees, it started to become about the best seat in the synagogue. What does that mean? It doesn't mean like front row, right? It doesn't mean like the spot with the best acoustics, right? It wasn't that. The best seat in the synagogue was the honored position, right? That the rabbi comes to sit right there. It's like, oh, that's the rabbi. I'll make sure you bow to him afterwards. Make sure to call him 목사님 or whatever it would be, right? And all our cultures does this, not just Korean culture, American culture as well. Because the seed of sin can enter into anything and pervert anything. It could go into a marriage and pervert it. It could enter into Christianity and pervert it. It could enter into following Jesus and pervert it. It could enter into following Yahweh and pervert it, which is what we see here. What we see is that these people, at some point, their devotion became a distraction. And at some point, it started not to become about Jesus, it started to become about them being greeted in the marketplace. Oh, Rabbi! It's like, oh, yes, oh, yeah. And they loved that. But before we point our fingers, the reality is we all love it. We all love it. We look at the pastors today, and we see that sin in pastors today. But before we point fingers, if you're a pastor, if you're sinless, then fine. But if you're sinful, if you like recognition, if you like some honor, if you like some respect, if you like to be treated well, it's a temptation to you. And that's what happened here. But I want you to see how evil this is, okay? Because the idea about religion being about me, the arrows being pointed to me, versus the arrows being pointed to God, which is Christianity, the arrows always pointing to Jesus, it's all about Jesus. That conflict, that tension is always evident. But I just want to go through the past few chapters that I've been preaching through in Luke. And just in these verses, it's very clear that the tension between the arrows being pointed to me as opposed to the arrows being pointed to God. And you'll see this tension, and Jesus addressing this tension of which way are your arrows being pointed to. So in Luke 9, you'll see it on your screen. Verse 46, an argument arose among them as to which of them is the greatest. This happens right after the transfiguration. They see Jesus, he's transfigured. They see him in his glory. The Father speaks, this is my Son. All the arrows point to Jesus in the transfiguration. As they climb down, very, very evident. As they argue, who is the greatest? Who's going to sit at the right hand of Jesus when he conquers? Me. As I follow Jesus, it's going to be about me. We see this over and over. Luke then 10, Mary and Martha. Martha initially starts off serving, with the arrows pointing towards Jesus. I'm going to serve Jesus. She invites Jesus, starts to serve Jesus, and then she starts to get distracted by her own serving, and it starts to become about her. And so Jesus responds to her by saying, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Jesus, it being pointed to Jesus. Your arrows, your affections, your life pointing to Jesus. Isn't it so interesting in the Lord's Prayer? The first thing we're taught to pray is, hallowed be your name. Right? Apart from this Lord's Prayer, the disciples' prayer, if you're a disciple of Christ, you pray this prayer. What would all our prayers look like? Me. God, this is what I'm going through, my work situation, my family situation, my financial situation, my relationship situation. What is it? Me. Arrows are me. Do you see that? Luke 11, 14 to 23, talking about demonic powers, but then this simple statement at the end of it. This is what evil looks like. Whoever is not with me is against me. Whoever does not gather with me scatters. It can very much easily be thinking, well, I'm not against God. It's just about me. That's all. Just about me. Life is about me. I'm not against God, right? You're not angry and antagonistic towards God. But Jesus makes it very clear. The arrows are either towards me or they are not. Simple as that. Luke 11:29, they repented at the preaching of Jonah. What is repenting? It's turning your direction. The arrows are pointing towards me. Now it's turning, and you're now pointing towards Jesus. In the very section that we're reading, verse 39, you're full of greed and wickedness. It's about me. and then some, me. That's the heart. The reason that Christianity starts to become a religion. You start to think, is it because I'm so corrupt? Yes. But at the end of the day, it's because it's about you. You see, I mentioned this a couple of sermons ago. We've heard that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And I know we struggle with pride in terms of what is pride really. I define it as this. Pride is not only thinking more highly of yourself, it is thinking of yourself more than others. It's as simple as that. You don't have to have this big ego thinking you're better than everybody else, but it's simply you wake up in the morning, who are you thinking about? Me. What happens a little bit afterwards? Me. What's so interesting is we're so disciplined at thinking about me. And if Christianity is about me, it starts to become a religion. You start to pray when you need something. You start to do good for your own benefit. And so now, if that's the reason, and if we have that heart that's all about me, oh, then what are the consequences? The consequences are dire, are extreme. The consequences, in verse 44, you're like an unmarked grave. People walk around them without you knowing. Basically saying you lead people away from God. Because if you were to walk over a grave, you become unclean. You can't worship the Lord. The idea is you're an unmarked grave. No one knows you're walking over uncleanness, right? But it's in that you're being led away from God. He's saying, as you do this, you're being led away from God. Verse 47, woe to you, you build the tombs and the prophets whom your fathers killed. So you are witnesses and you consent to the deeds of your fathers, for they killed them and you build their tombs. This is strong because it says your fathers killed these prophets. But you honor the prophets, and by your actions, you honor the very people that killed the prophets. You can't get any more evil than that. That's how wicked this is when Christianity becomes a religion. They see our faith, they see our action, and they don't want anything to do with it. And it continues on, and it continues to grow worse. The wisdom of God says, I will send the prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and persecute, so that the blood of all the prophets shed from the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation. You know, it's hard to comprehend the fact that these prophets that were killed and persecuted, Jesus is saying, you are no different when you simply live a religious life. It happens not outside the church, right? The idea of you leading people away from God doesn't necessarily happen outside the church. It happens inside the church. It says that the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah was perished between the altar and the sanctuary. It matters what's preached in the pulpit. It matters what's discussed in your small groups. It matters the culture of your small groups. As someone who's never known God can walk in and still feel welcomed. Those things matter because it's in this place we either point people to Jesus or away from Jesus. And that's why it continues on in saying that if you continue this, woe to you, lords, in verse 52, you take away the key of knowledge. It's as simple as this. The internal and the external are both important. Jesus didn't just stay up in heaven and say, oh, I love you, and cross his arms and just wait. No. He loves, so he comes in the form of a man, and he serves, he lives this life, he dies our death. because he loves, internal and external. For some of us, we need to take a deep, long look at our own hearts. There are certain sins that we've struggled with that we've just continued to allow. But allowing the Lord, that he would convict us, he would lead us. For others of us, we just need to change how we live, change how we spend our money. Time to say, okay, I get it. The internal and the external, it both matters. But it starts with the internal first. You see God, his beauty, his goodness, his righteousness. It starts from there. As we bow our heads to him, our hearts change. So let's do that. Let's bow our heads.